So the person who is listening, don't they have to use some analysis too? Like the other person that said something that you're listening to, don't you then have to figure, okay, what are they going for here? They just told me something. Are they going for me to say, oh, I really feel terrible about that? Your validation, doesn't that depend on what your determination of what the other person's intention is?
That really is validation. Validation is a form of empathizing with somebody. And the idea came that empathy is a form of, ready for this, data gathering.
Really?
Yes. So if you empathize, if you validate with somebody who comes to you with something, and you're listening to them, then you're going to validate or acknowledge what they're saying. Just in the elegance of the way it works, we humans are elegant. We're part of nature, just like in any other type of medicine. There's an elegance involved if you really look at it. You, by empathizing with them and validating, you will give them the freedom to further define themselves to you. If this is a child, you could imagine the impact of that on helping that child develop and reinforce the sense of who they truly are. If this is an adult, then chances are, like all of us, that's already been ruined. Again, we're all in the same boat here. So for the adult, it may help them heal a bit. If you happen to be married to that adult and you do this with each other, now you have what I call a healing laboratory. Your marriage is now a healing laboratory. But with a child, this becomes exquisitely important in terms of their development, because you are gathering data about who that child is, and they themselves are also gathering data about who they are.
Dr. Ferraioli, how about a sense of structure as well? You talk about validation, but when you're bringing up children, how important is it to give them a firm foundational structure?
Well, it's very important. When we look at structure, one of my favorite terms, structure. You can pan out on structure way out there, and you could look at it as an existential question. Structure. Where we have this existential problem of freedom. In fact, well, what do we really do? You're born, and what are you really supposed to do with this life anyway? Right? So there's that. If you pan out, there's that very global, macro, question of structure. But when you come in and you bring it in a little bit, then you're looking at structure in terms of on a microcosm. How am I showing this child? What am I communicating to this child in terms of a style or a pace of living? How does a parent communicate that to a child? Certainly directly. You tell the kid, clean up your room. Whatever you do, make sure your homework's done first, and then you can go play. Or college-age kid, use protection. Whatever. College. It's all relative. But we're also communicating not just with those sorts of comments, but we're also communicating structure by example. The parent who says to me, well, I just figured little Sally was fine. She was just locked in her room for 8 hours reading, and it sounds good to me. And I said, well, sure it does. You're off the hook for 8 hours. That's pretty good. But then Sally is now 50 and is in my office, and she's saying, you know what? I was so lonely a lot of the time. She's saying, I said, well, what do you mean lonely? She said, well, I'd be in my room for 7, 8 hours. Nobody would ever check in on me. See, that pace or style of living had an impact on her. Mom felt it differently, or dad, whoever it was, or auntie, grandma. The feeling the child had was one of isolation, perhaps abandonment, etc. That's a pace or a structure that child has brought in now. So when they're 50, they have episodes that potentially involve, out of nowhere, as people always say, periods of feeling lost, abandoned, isolated.
476-5959. Lewis, you're on News Talk 590 WRW with Dr. Anthony Ferraioli. How are you?
I'm very good, gentlemen. Thank you for taking my call. I just had, this may be a little bit off topic, but I feel like it relates a little bit. What are some tools maybe that I could use, say, for an instance where someone is doing the same thing that you do, and you just want to show them, say, hey, you do this also, and it bothers me, and it bothers both people, and you just kind of want to diffuse the situation. Like, for instance, if I'm driving and my significant other doesn't like the way I drive, and then when she drives, I comment back kind of thing. What's probably a better way to handle a situation like that.
Good, Lewis. Well, what you're talking about there is sort of, and if I understand you correctly, you can, if not, please let clarify it for me.
Sure.
The idea that you both kind of do it to each other?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
All right. You know, for me, one of the most interesting things about human nature is what you might call identification. You know, we really hate it when we see in other people things that we either do or remind us of ourselves. So in addition to the obvious level of your question, the more practical level of your question, there's also what it brings up, which is this idea of, look, if somebody's doing to us what we do also, that's going to be an extra challenge for us, because we really don't like ourselves doing these things, or period. There's an awful lot of self-loathing. When we see in other people the things we do, and if it's a spouse, we can hurt each other even more this way. We are going to be very defensive, and the key to this, to unravel this sort of where you guys are stuck, is to not be defensive with this. So, Lewis, are you still there with me here?
Yeah, I'm here.
So if your spouse comments to you, in fact, if I can ask you, give me a for instance. What would you say to her? What would she say to you? What would you two say to each other?
Just like, I think, just you know how I hate it that when you do that, and I'd be like, okay, all right, and then something else would happen, and the same situation would just kind of come up.
Okay. Well, what happens when it comes up again? What do you say then?
Well, lately I think I've just been trying to, not say anything in particular, and then if I'm driving and she says something to me, I said, see, you're doing the same thing to me, and I don't like it when you do it, and then, I just try to let her know that, say, hey, you did this to me, and I don't really like it, so please don't do it to me, kind of thing.
That's pretty good, Lewis. What does she say to you?
I don't know. It ends up just kind of being very probably defensive, exactly what you're kind of describing a little bit.
Okay.
Just saying, she doesn't, being defensive where she says, well, I don't really do that.
Okay, so denying it, basically.
Yeah.
I've only met, let me start by saying, this is what we humans do. All right, we are ready. Our defenses are ready and waiting. We are ready to go. When someone says a word to us, one of the things immediately that happens is that we mobilize our defense mechanism. So two things have to happen here, Lewis. Number one, let's start with on your end. Remember, we have to watch what is your tone when you're saying, this to her. We have to watch tone. Tone is basically a subconscious event, I must say. Right? Most of us don't really know our tone, and yet it really influences what the other person hears, despite the content of what we're saying to them.
I completely agree.
Okay? So on your end, it's going to be, what's my tone in this situation? Okay? And then for your wife, on her end, it's going to be, well, why am I feeling so defensive or threatened by what he's saying? Let me maybe acknowledge what he's saying. Okay, one of the adult skills, we were talking about adult skills earlier, especially in a marriage, is the ability to say, I'm sorry. Okay, the other one is thank you. We're lucky if we get one or two of these a year, I think, in our marriage. No offense, Kim, my beautiful wife.
Of course.
Right? So it really helps us quite a bit to build emotional intimacy in a marriage, or something I call emotional credibility or trust. Right? When we can say these things, like, I'm sorry. So for your wife, in this case, for your wife, and I realize it can go either way. So in this case, for your wife, she would be saying something like, look, I'm sorry. Isn't that simple? It's sort of, I'm sorry. Two words. You've watched your tone. She has said that she's sorry, and boom, you guys are done for this particular episode. Okay.
Really back to the validation, almost kind of.
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it.
Okay, Lewis.
All right. Thank you so much.